Hi everyone, it's William with the 1939 Grand Duke Dmitri series. I should say both diary and correspondence series. So far we're doing letters, and I'm in the apartment, which you may recognize. I'm not exerting myself today. As long as Dmitri is stuck in bed, there's not really anything new for me to show you that he mentions. Anyway, we are up to the penultimate part of the letter to Maria, dated October the 27th, 1939, and much to discuss. So next time, the next video will be the last of this diary and of this letter. And he'd referred previously to two letters that he'd sent to his sister previous to this one, and hoping that she'd gotten them both. And one of them, the one of the 23rd of September, we've already done. But I just yesterday discovered that I actually do have the other one on my laptop. So I guess when we're finished with this one, the other one is not dated, or at least I don't have the date on my laptop. So I think probably not dated. And it's also October, but clearly it was earlier in October. And so this period of time in September, October 1939 is very, very well covered, which is great. We know exactly what was going on with our friend. What was going on mentally, that is, because he was stuck in bed, so he wasn't doing much. Okay, so our recap from last time, a very important discussion of Dmitri's political views and the question he was asking himself of whether he was going to remain neutral. And it seemed like kind of a moot point, as indeed it would be as things turned out, because he was in a neutral country. He was proposing to go to a neutral country, which is Greece, if he got better. And, even if he had decided to make a definite declaration, for instance, I am on the side of the Allies, which he was in everything else without officially declaring it, then what difference would it make? Is he implying that he was going to seek some kind of actual task on behalf of the side that he chose? Some sort of involvement. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to read too much into it. Anyway, I do think it's important. And he told his sister that he had the perspective of a pan-European patriot instead of a Russian nationalist. So that was very interesting, because he'd been very much, an active part of Young Russia, which was wanting, which had more or less Russian nationalist outlook on things, even though it was then the Soviet Union. Anyway, our cast for today is massive, because Dmitri is going to talk about his and Maria's childhood, just briefly, and we'll have more of that. There's another letter to her in December 1939 where he'll talk more on that topic. But he mentions the general, who you recall was Vladimir Wrangel, who was handling his affairs and who was a mentor to Polly. He mentions Zhdanov, Laming, and Cook, and Welter, and Vorontsov, who were all, or Zhdanov, Laming, Cook, and Welter, who were all important mentors to him as a child. And he mentions as people who were attached to Maria in childhood, Tanya, Fräulein Hase, and one person whose name I can't make out. And then in relation to Polly, he mentions, the general and somebody called, one of the Vorontsovs. I'm not sure which one. He mentions Ella and Sergei. And so, great cast today. things were a bit discombobulated, as I mentioned in the first video related to this letter, because the photocopy I have of the original was rather hastily made in Mainau, and through no fault of the person who made the photocopies, a few words were in the top lines, at the top of the pages, were cut off. And so that actually made it difficult to even figure out, since the pages weren't numbered, which page should follow which page. And so I have a paragraph this time around that probably belongs to an earlier page, but I'm just going to attach it here. It's about Polly, so apologies for that. I don't think it diminishes, so we'll have every word of the letter. I don't think it diminishes anything. It just is possibly in the wrong place. And I said that I might have to edit some things out because of, things that Dmitri said about Audrey that were unkind and possibly not true. But I was thinking of another letter. So I don't think there's anything in this letter that really needs to. He expresses some resentment of her, but I don't think there's anything that needs to be edited out, so I'm not doing that. Yeah, okay. I suppose I should get started. Okay, here we go. One thing is quite obvious. The Nansist paper is awful during these times. Do you know what a Nansist, that's how we are called in France, is? And here there's one of these missing words from the top of the page. Move out of the place you live in. The general can't go to Beaumont. It is just as impossible for him to go, let us say, to Beaumesnil as to England. He had to get a police pass for going to the blank. There are some words that are very difficult to make out here. And could not telephone or wire. Now it's a little better. That's what the Nansists are. So for me, it will be quite a job to get all my papers. Plus that my passport ends on the 1st of November and I can't go to Paris to have my new papers out, as one must do it personally. Maybe I will come to have a look at you for Christmas and then go to an American sanatorium, but when I get well, I will go back to Europe, and I don't think I will keep neutral, ! But I don't know yet. All right, actually, I've already babbled on for 7 minutes here, so maybe I won't do this long paragraph about Polly mentioning all these different people, and just do a short one today, because I wanted to talk a little bit about the Nansist passport in that situation. I think there's something along those lines that a person can get nowadays to allow them to cross borders, but it seems to me it would be great if we would go back to the old Nansist system, because there are so many people, so many displaced people in the world. So many stateless people or people who may have citizenship but can't return to their countries. So I think the Nansist passport is a very good idea. Anyway, so the Nansist passport, that was something that was, trying to remember what his first name is. Friedrich, he was a Swedish, or a Norwegian actually, polar explorer, and he won the Nobel Peace Prize. I believe, for the Nansist passport. And the first were issued in 1922, and they continued to be issued until 1938. And at that time, of course, the League of Nations had long since been defunct, and they were still issued, I think, until 1942, but by another agency that was based in London, although they were still called Nansist passports. And the thing that precipitated the creation of the Nansist passports was the fact that once the Soviet Union was established, at some point between 1921 and 1922, any Russian emigre was disenfranchised by the Soviet government. So you either return right now, or you are no longer a Russian citizen. You no longer have a valid Russian passport. And since the other countries were pretty much at that point acknowledging the legitimacy of the Soviet Union, of the Soviet government, they were not accepting Imperial Russian passports. So, that left so many people as stateless. And some of them because they couldn't get citizenship in another country, and some of them because they weren't willing to accept citizenship in another country. They weren't willing to accept that they were no longer Russian citizens, and Dmitri was one of those. I'm quite sure he could have, especially, I don't know about earlier on, but I would think he could have gotten citizenship in France or England. And certainly when he married Audrey, he could have gotten citizenship in the US with relative ease. And he just didn't want to do that. He didn't want to ever become a citizen of another country. He was Russian. And so, let's see, 450,000 of these were issued. I just got this information from Wikipedia. So if you Google Nansist passport, there's a very small but very interesting Wikipedia page about the Nansist passport. And so Dmitri was expiring. This letter was finished, was written, or at least finished on October 27th, and that was when he dated it, and his Nansist passport was expiring on the 1st of November. And so, yeah, that made it problematic for him to travel. This is what he's trying to tell Maria, of course. I can't just get on a ship and come to the U.S. I have this sort of equivocal passport that's about to expire. And then he gives an example of someone else who has a Nansist passport, which is, his assistant, Vladimir Wrangel, who can't even move or couldn't even move within France itself. I'm not sure what Beaumont was. Dmitri refers to it more than once. But Beaumesnil was the chateau that he'd shared with Audrey. I think Beaumont was where his things were stored. At least some of his things were stored. I don't know who it belonged to. But Wrangel couldn't go there. The general, as Dmitri calls him, couldn't go there. And couldn't go, it would be just as impossible, Dmitri tells us, for him to go to Beaumesnil as it would to go to England and pick up Polly and accompany him to the U.S. He had to go get a police pass just to go to blank. Unfortunately, I can't make out that name, and he couldn't telephone or wire. So, wow. I had no idea. I need to look into that a little more and see if Dmitri has correct information. Well, his information must have been coming from Wrangel himself. But clearly he was people with Nansist passports were, to begin with, very, very restricted in France. And now apparently things had eased up a bit because now he can telephone or wire. Now it's a little better, Dmitri says, but, telling his sister, this is what it is to have an Nansist passport. She had one as well. In fact, that's one of the interesting things about the Wikipedia page is that it has a fascinating list of people who had Nansist passports and never took citizenship anywhere else, including some very famous composers like Rachmaninoff and I think Stravinsky. So anyway, it's odd that it lists Maria as one of these famous people who had a Nansist passport, but it doesn't list Dmitri. I'm not sure why that is, because he certainly never took citizenship anywhere. Okay, anything else on that? I'm already up to 15 minutes. Yes, another person that I was quite surprised to see had a Nansist passport was the one-time King of Spain, the former King of Spain, Alfonso XIII. So yeah, have a look at that list. I think you'll find it quite amusing. And it's funny because Hannah Arendt, in her book on the history of totalitarianism, talks about how lucky the people were who got these Nansist passports. 450,000 people, that was a drop in the bucket. for the number of refugees that there were in the world between 1922 and 1938. And what did you have to have in order to get one? I don't know, but at least these people had some standing. They had some recognition in the various countries that they went to. Although whereas displaced people without any documentation like this, without any documents like this, were really in a fix. Anyway, much to think about in relation to what's going on in the world today. Dmitri is going to talk more about renewing, what it takes for him to renew his Nansist passport. He'll be doing that in, I think he waits until maybe April 1940. Anyway, yeah, sorry about this abrupt curtailment of what I was going to talk about today, but yeah, better to put all the Polly stuff together, because even though the next paragraph is, I think, out of place, it's still, the last page of the letter is almost completely about Polly, and comparing it to the things that, yeah, Dmitri was thinking about in relation to his and Maria's own childhood. And then a little more about medical things. So anyway, I hope to see you next time. Bye.